A new race to the bottom could have begun with the offer from Vietnam to the US for zero tariffs between the two countries. President Trump put out on Friday that General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, To Lam, had called to say that Vietnam is prepared for zero tariffs if an agreement could be reached with the US. Now, this was confirmed later in the day by way of a statement from the Vietnamese government that indeed Vietnam is prepared for zero duties on imports from the US if the US applies the same principle to imports from Vietnam. The government said also that Vietnam is prepared to import yet more from the US, and that adds to a pledge made earlier to buy $54 billion worth of US goods, principally oil and aircraft, and then further to facilitate new US investment into Vietnam. And to that end, Vietnam is preparing to send a delegation to Washington this weekend to be led by Deputy Prime Minister Hu Duc Pha. Vietnam, let's not forget, is a major exporter. Its trade surplus with the US was $123 billion last year, behind only China, the EU, and Mexico. A number of apparel and footwear makers produced in Vietnam, Nike, for example, whose stock shot up just on that announcement, as it did for other companies such as Lululemon, Foot Locker, and Wayfair. And this, when other stocks have been falling around the world, as we've seen. The market certainly sees the Vietnamese move as seriously promising. Vietnam has in fact already offered 0% on some items like wood imports from the US. It also announced tariff cuts earlier on other US imports from 5 to 2% on LNG, from a high of 64 to 32% across a range of automobiles, from 10 to 5% on ethanol. It's not a done deal yet. Trump, as we've seen, is more fond of applying tariffs than dropping them. But this could set a challenging new benchmark for many countries on that list of high tariffing countries displayed here at the White House. Vietnam was right up there with 46% tariffs imposed, and that led to some early excitement in some countries on whom the demands on that list were lesser, such as India, that their exports could now become more competitive against Vietnam's. The new Vietnamese move could upend all such calculations, and the tariff levels that have been announced, that were displayed at the Rose Garden at the White House here, are not set in stone. They could be raised or lowered under the modification clause of that tariffs order that was passed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Trump has said the tariffs are giving the US greater power to negotiate, that everyone is talking to the US, and something now like the Vietnamese deal would greatly enhance Trump's bargaining power if it were to go ahead.